And our next and final guest here on Punky's Mixtape for the season is joining me all the way from Italy this evening. I would like everybody to welcome to the show Yotam of Useless ID. How we doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing great today. I can't complain. It is a perfectly beautiful sunny day here in Maine, so I've got no complaints on my end. How's everything in Italy?
Very hot. It's kind of hard getting some sleep for the most part. Like where we are now, we're at my fiance's mother's house, and there's AC over here, but we kind of bounce around between two apartments, and like the second one it's kind of deadly, right? Yeah.
I think a lot of people are experiencing that heat wave all across the world right now. I mean, it's definitely brutal.
So I mean, sleeping has been interesting, but I'm used to it. I'm used to like any situation from being on tour for as long as I have been. So things are good.
Well, that's good to hear. And honestly, I think when you tour as heavily as someone like you has done, you get used to some pretty fucked up sleeping conditions. So a little bit of heat is not the worst thing.
No, it's fine. But I think the worst thing is when there's a little bit of heat and then like a fly finds its way into the room, or like a mosquito, and it's just like buzzing in your ear. So you're like, oh, now this.
Then you just kind of have like that like apocalypse now moment with the fan just going, and it's just boom, boom, and just versus that fly.
And I'm a light sleeper, so me and sleep are not big friends for the most part. And if I'm lucky to get like 7 hours of sleep, so I know that the following day is going to be like much better for me.
I am the same way. I thrive from like 4 to 5 hours a night, and that's pretty much all I get. So, yeah. Unfortunately, like you said it best. Sleep and yourself are not good friends, and neither am I. But as much as I'd like to be. But
I think you just reached that point where you really exhaust yourself if you don't sleep, and then there comes a time where your body just collapses, and then you get that sleep that you've been needing the whole time,
Just desperately fighting for. So for my mixtapers that may not be familiar, and they should if they do some homework around here, but tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about Useless ID.
Well, what part of myself do you want to know, and what part of Useless ID? Because we have a long history.
You have an extensive history starting back in the middle 90s all the way to now. So First of all, tell us a little bit about yourself. We'll start there.
Well, I was born in Israel. My family moved to the States when I was 5, and then I grew up in the States. Formative years, from like 5 till 14. Then my parents decided to move back to Israel, which, you kind of get used to one situation and one mentality and one culture, and suddenly you're thrown into this other completely new culture with a different language, and you kind of have to get used to it. So that's been like a big lesson for me, kind of like getting accustomed to new situations. I think that's why I do so well with touring or flights, or I'm just like or moving apartments. It's just been like such a big part of my life from the moment I was born. So my family moved to Israel when I was like 14, and then it was like, okay, it took like a year till I discovered punk rock. I was like already into bands, but like once I discovered punk rock, I really wanted a band, and I really went out of my way to find out who does what in Haifa, Israel, and who plays in a band and who listens to punk rock. And luckily I met up, I paired with the guys, and we started touring like a few years later, and that's how it's been.
And then basically it's just kicked off from there. Now, if I've done my homework correctly, it was one of the members from the Ataris, and you guys ended up doing a split together way back in 1997. I mean, that's older than some of my viewers have been around. But for, guys like us that are, 30 plus, 40 plus, that honestly feels like yesterday to me. But so obviously, got some attention from there, went out on the road, got to be with a ton of amazing bands over the years. Obviously I see that you guys have toured with Lagwagon, and bands like that. So what was it like coming out of Israel, and this kind of kick-starting right into touring? What was that change like for you?
Well, Useless ID did a first tour without me. I played 2 shows with them before they left for their first kind of, I wouldn't call it a U.S. tour. They wanted to relocate to the States, and that's what they did for like the better part of 8 months. And I was wrapping up my last year of school, and I didn't know what to expect. I just heard stories from them, that they played shows with like Good Riddance and Lifetime and many other bands, and they went to see the Descendants. So I got this like certain picture of, wow, it's probably great in the States. And then when I went on tour with Useless ID for the first time, I had this like sort of idea of what was going to happen, but it was the total opposite of that. Like I thought we're coming to the States and people know us, very naive, very like, and it's like if we were kind of nobodies in Israel, we were complete nobodies in the States. And the guy who was supposed to book us, who said that he booked us like 2 months of tours, he actually booked one show. And Ishai ended up rebooking the whole thing. We stayed like a month at this guy's house, and he just like was on the phone all the time. So that was like a real eye opener for me. And just pretty much right before we started the tour that he booked, we had a few like local shows, and one of them was with the Ataris, and that's how we connected with them. And I think if we wouldn't have connected with them, I don't know what would happen with us, because we're very, very lucky to have met the Ataris at the moment we did, and kind of like connect with them and have them help us. And really, it kick-started off pretty much everything for us.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you did that split back in the day, and that was a great way to gain exposure, especially here in the United States and things like that. And obviously it's been a long history since then, over the last 24 years. Not to call out anyone's age on this, but obviously it's been a wild ride since then, with plenty of ups and downs along the way. You guys have been on a handful of different labels. You've had different members coming in. You had stepped from backing vocals to main vocals, and lots of major changes, which any band occurs and goes through. But once things were kind of solidified in the early 2000s, how was tour life from there, besides that first run in America where you were had one show lined up?
I mean, once we hit the road, it was fun. I just fell in love with it. And then the tours that followed, it just became like a thing, like a part of our lives. Like if we spend too much time in Israel or too much time in one place, we're like itching to go back on the road. And then if we're on the road for too long, like, I don't know, more than 2 months, then we're like, all right, enough, and go back. So it kind of like this relationship started. But I think the craziest thing for us was once you could call it our debut album on Kung Fu Records, Bad Story, Happy Ending. Once that came out and it was well received in Japan, we were asked to play some shows. We flew to Japan, and we were like shocked at the amount of love we got from the Japanese crowd, and the amount of people that showed up and, singing our songs. It was crazy. So it's like you never knew what to expect. And of course, I think with us, like anything we've got throughout the years, as far as if you want to call it success, as far as putting our name out or anything, it's all hard work, all done from hard work. I don't think. Well, of course, that thing with the Ataris was this little spark of luck that kind of like jump-started us. But anything we did, we just put our lives into it, and it's, that's what it is. That's what we do.
What it's all about. I mean, if you want that type of turnaround and have that expectation, you can't just half-ass it. You've got to really put in and keep grinding. And even then, to get started, you didn't have the advantages that a lot of bands have now, and that's with modern technology and the internet. I mean, you had it in small forms in the '90s, but not like we do now as a massive platform for getting yourself out there. It's much harder, to get your album into somebody's hands in the late '90s and early 2000s than it is now. I mean, shit, now you can just forward it and then boom, here's my album. It takes
Exactly.
seconds.
Oh, it's much different now. Like what you could say took us 20 years to do, someone could do in one day. For just posting a song on YouTube, going to sleep, and then it's an overnight success. It goes viral. So yeah, it's completely different. It's a different world. Things work differently, and that's how it is. Like I'm not for it, and I'm not against it. I just accept it for what it is, and try to keep up with the times. But I'm not a 15-year-old internet wonder boy, so I just try to keep putting out great music and stay in touch with the people that like what I do and like what we do, and keep visiting them and play shows for them, and that in itself is great. Anything else is a bonus.
It really is, and it's so hard to track some of these algorithms and shit like that sometimes because times are always changing. Like when I went to film school in the early 2000s, by the time I graduated, the entire market had changed. It went from you needed a production crew into now this. You have an entire production crew right here in your cell phone, and it's just a matter of finding different ways to keep doing what you're passionate about and staying relevant with all the massive changes that have happened. But there's one thing that could be said, about punk rock is that it's pretty tried and true, and with the types of bands, even from 20, 30 years ago to now, they all have that same drive. They have that same ambition, and they're all just some, wide-eyed kid from somewhere in the middle of nowhere with, big dreams and aspirations of playing their music for more people. And that's, what we really try to thrive and push here is those classic grassroots elements. And some of those things you can't just bypass. I mean, yeah, it's great for like some people to become an overnight sensation, but there's also something to be said that people that went and did the groundwork and built the foundation for themselves and really built themselves up over time. And we're starting to see that with some bands, and there's a ton of amazing indie bands that are out there now, and I'd probably say at least more now so than 20 years ago. I think we have, a massive influx in these artists because we have more platforms than we've ever had in order to get your voice out there.
Yeah, for sure.
What do you think about some of the changes in the scene over the last few years, nevertheless the last decade?
I'll tell you what, we were on tour with Good Riddance. You know Good Riddance?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we were on tour with them like 2 years ago, and they kept saying that they're just lucky to still be doing this, and we feel that too. It's because I think at the end of the day, it's longevity that counts more than anything. Like, well, we can't speak from a point of view of a band that's been doing this for 2 years. We've been doing this for more than 20 years, so we see everything differently. We see this like bands like Good Riddance and Propaganda and bands that were, I guess, a few years older than us and doing it like a bit before us, but we kind of like I don't know, we kind of moved forward with those guys. You know what I mean? So we're a part of that school, and so I wouldn't know what to tell you as far as all these like overnight sensations, and like I see them, I see it, but I think there's both pros and cons for that situation, because many of it's like child actors. Many child actors, they eventually they grow up and they're kind of missing something in their childhood. So as much as they made money when they were like 7 and 8 years old until they were like 12, I think it took away something else from their youth, and that they can't get back. So it just I don't know. You know what I mean?
I really do. Because there's a lot of these, quick YouTube stars, and
sorry, there's a cat. There's a cat over here. I think.
Oh, you're fine. There's one just out of frame right here. You can't see. There's a cat tree right here. My little girl Nami, she's sleeping off to the side.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anytime any animal or child, anything interrupts, we don't care. I think it's part of life.
No, just so no one thinks that I'm I don't know, doing some weird crazy stuff.
Oh shit. But I think personally, like, you're right, because a lot of these new quick overnight sensations, they're not taking time to explore the other avenues of their youth, which you would commonly get to when you don't have a massive spotlight on you 24/7. And it's the same thing said for a lot of these content creators as well. Like, you're so focused within the moment. Have you gotten out and given yourself a chance to fail? And personally, I think failure builds character. If you constantly everything is handed to you, you don't truly appreciate it, and then when it's gone, and did you really earn it in the first place? And so it's interesting how the internet equates value right now. It doesn't necessarily reflect that of hard work and dedication. Sometimes it just reflects the flavor of the minute, and that's to be expected with some individuals. But there are others that like truly stand out, and there's a ton of amazing underground bands right now that are hardworking and dedicated to the craft, and they're doing it all the right ways. And I see it all the time on the show. And what we really try to promote is that unsung voice, because I think we all know what it's like to be that opener in a dive bar in the middle of nowhere, and nobody knows who you are, trying to make a name for yourself.
Yeah, I've done that both with Useless ID and both solo. But I mean, in the middle of a tour where the shows are kind of like this, because I can't. I don't think even now. I don't think my tours are like the tours I've done. That it's sometimes you have those tours where it's like 5 people a night, like in the beginning, where it's like. Like, why am I doing this? But you don't give up. You just keep doing it. And then next time around, the 5 people become 10, and then they become 20. And before you know it, you have like a decent crowd in LA or wherever. Or not Boise, Idaho. Boise, Idaho is a bit hard. But no matter how much I try, I like going there because I got a buddy there. But the shows are kind of hard, kind of rough.
We're here in Maine, and we're in the middle of nowhere, but we have an unbelievable punk scene. So if you're ever feeling froggy and you want to come to Portland, trust us, we'll welcome you with open arms here.
For sure. So, Paula, you want to go?
You want to come to Maine? We got lobster, we got blueberries, we have more coastline than the entire continental United States. I got tons of Maine facts. It's actually true. We have more coastline than the entire continental United States. But I digress. We could talk about Maine all day, which I don't. But so you guys, you've toured extensively. You've made connections. You've done so much with so many people all over the world. Is there any place that really stands out to you that just really resonated with you? You mentioned that being able to first play Japan and seeing people sing your songs back to you. Massively moving experience. Is there any others over your couple of decades of a career that just really stand out to you?
I think for pretty much any band, unless you're huge in the States and then you're huge but even then, I know like bands that are big in the US but are not big in, I don't know, certain places in Europe. I think it's a very territorial thing with a band. So for us, we've been to Japan like 20 times, and it never gets old. We're always like, once we're on stage and everyone's so excited, and it's just like, I always feel like this is why we're doing this. This is why we keep going. It's for moments like these, and it's not only the people singing the lyrics back at us. Some people are crying from just witnessing us be there. And we can't forget that after all, we're just like these 4 Well, you still call us kids, I guess. With four kids from Haifa that started playing together, and so to me that's a crazy story. We come from the Middle East, like
And to be one of the most if not the most well-known punk band to come out of Israel. I mean, that's got to be life-changing in itself.
Yeah, and the thing is, we've opened doors for like many other bands that are doing it and are doing good now. There's this band called Not on Tour from Israel, so they're doing very well in Europe. And there's this other band, Kids Insane. So these are all bands that kind of like grew up on our sounds and coming to our shows. So they saw Useless ID doing it, so they're like, all right, we're gonna start doing it. So it's a good feeling,
Well, absolutely. And, when you can have that cause and effect on the area that you grew up in, you can see that affecting other bands and inspiring them. I mean, when you think about punk rock, I'm not going to lie, Israel's not the first place that I would automatically assume, of having a vibrant punk rock scene. But the more I look into it, and then I started doing the show over a year ago, and then the amazing bands we've been getting in from Tel Aviv and other parts of Israel, it's blowing me away. And what was that like that? So you went there, you were about 14, 15 years old. Was there even a real solidified punk rock scene there?
Well, the first year that I was in school, I just heard about like these local bands. I just saw like graffiti on walls and like markers of names, and I kept asking, what's this, what's that? And by the next year, I started discovering punk rock because I moved to a different school. And it was like, the students were, it was like, I wouldn't say a school, it was like an art school. So it was like, I wouldn't say troubled kids, but it was probably these kids that got kicked out of other schools, such as the ones I was in. So one of them was like a skater, so he was, he knew all these bands, he knew Bad Religion and Pennywise and Black Flag, and I've never heard of these things. So once I discovered that, I was just blown away, and and then he kept bringing me more tapes of like Gorilla Biscuits and Minor Threat, and then he said, there's a bands in Haifa that do this. So that's how I discovered them. I started going to shows, but it was so low key and so word to mouth. I don't even know if there were flyers. Like there were probably a few, but it was just word to mouth, no internet. And you're in Israel, so that's like, whatever they're doing in Israel, I don't even think they were copying what's happening in the U.S. because no one was watching shows. I remember a guy from Useless ID. His sister lived in the U.S., so once I knew him, I heard that he has like all these like cassette tapes of like Bad Brain shows and Gorilla Biscuit shows that he would show to like Ishai, and we would idolize the older kids, like Guy, who's in Useless ID. But at the time, I said, I gotta be his friend. I gotta like see these videos that everyone's talking about. So, yeah, it's weird, man.
I think a lot of us, I think that's pretty much for those of us, that got in, the things, prior to the internet, those of us that, 35, almost 40, like myself.
Yeah.
And there was always that person in school where you just looked like them. Like I need to talk to them. And it was the same. I had a friend that actually was, a couple years ahead of me, was a senior when I was a freshman, would actually go on to become my tattoo artist now and a good friend of mine. But same idea. Like I saw him walking through the halls wearing a Bad Religion shirt, and my sister, who's 10 years older than me, had given me a Bad Religion Suffer on cassette, a few years before that. And I saw somebody, like the first person ever wearing a Bad Religion shirt. I'm like, oh my God. And then linking up with them and watching VHS performances and stuff like that, it snowballed from there. And I think everybody can kind of look back and have that, one or a handful of people that inspired them to get to where they are currently musically. And I think it's a pretty much a universal story, not studios, a universal story for most of us, that was that one person and that word of mouth. And it was the same here, growing up in the Northeast. Fortunately I am surrounded by the hardcore scene from Boston and New York, and growing up in the Boston area, it was everywhere. It was very prevalent in the 90s for me, so I grew up in hardcore and punk and metal. But at the same time, before the internet, it was very word of mouth. It was, you get a flyer handed to you at school, and that was it. There was no, Facebook e-bikes or anything like that. It was an entirely different time. And I never would think then, sitting there watching these cassette tapes, these VHS movies, that I would be later on, 2 decades later in my life, being able to film some of these bands that inspired me to pick up a guitar in the first place, but nevertheless, like yourself, a wide-eyed kid, from Israel, getting to listen to these bands, and then later on here, getting signed with Kung Fu, and then jumping a little bit more forward, signing to Fat Wreck, in around 2012, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
Yeah, look at Punky's done his homework. Oh man. Now that must have been just massive hit. Obviously growing up hearing No Effects and a lot of the old, that generation beforehand with your Bad Religion, your Pennywise, those ones that had started a little bit earlier. What was that like? Coming full circle to getting to nevertheless signing the Fat Wreck, but eventually getting to work with Mike.
I'll tell you what. We discovered all those bands, like, as I mentioned, Pennywise, Bad Religion, and once we discovered No Effects, I think the guys knew them before I did. It was just like passed to me. Like Ishai told me about them. He's like, No Effects, and I'm like, what's No Effects? And then like I found out No Effects, and then I saw like a No Use for a Name video on like Headbangers Ball in the middle of the night, and then we realized that there's like this a label that puts all these bands out, like them, Strung Out, Lagwagon, everything kind of started making sense together. And one of the goals with Useless ID was to be a Fat Records band. Like from day one, it was like, we got to be on Fat Records. And it was such a distant dream. And it was like, we didn't think this could happen in like a million years. Because I think when Useless ID started out, you could say that like many bands do, we were taking like heavy influences from what we were listening to, or even what they were listening to. So Useless ID kind of sounded like Screeching Weasel and No Effects, like a mix of that stuff, like very like fast pop punk, melodic, and I don't think we got our thing dialed in yet. Like it took us years, but they met Fat Mike on their first tour. I think at one of these. That club in San Francisco, I forget the name, Bottom of the Hill. I think they met him at the Bottom of the Hill. They passed the demo tape to him. He was nice. He's like, yeah, I know Useless ID, I know you guys. And every year, ever since, we passed our music to Fat Mike. It was like the demos for Bad Story, Happy Ending. We passed that to him. I think then we were on Kung Fu for a few releases, so we kind of like let Mike rest. Then with Lost Broken Bones, we were kind of labelless, and we put it out on 5 different labels. So we gave that to Fat Mike, and then I don't know, it just reached a point where we're like, with the album Symptoms, which is, it's funny, it's like our least Fat Wreck sounding album. It's like a rock record, and it's like very personal. And that's the album he chose. He's like, yeah, I'm gonna put this out. And I remember before a show, I was working for this artist in Israel. That was like my job. I was playing bass for him. And right before I went on stage with him, Ishai called me up and he said, hey, Fat Records is putting out Symptoms, just so you know. And I was like, oh my God, holy shit, fuck yes. Just screaming there. And they're looking at me, well, what happened? What happened? You'll never understand. Yeah, so that's, you don't give up. That's what this whole thing told me. If a band from the Middle East, I mean, I guess we have some points. Me living in the U.S. or growing up in the U.S. and preserving my English language and reading books all the time and writing all the time, so I never lost the language, So we have that. We don't sound Israeli. We don't sing with an Israeli accent. We sound American, but I think with sounding American, the lyrical content and what we choose to sing about, how we choose to sing, there's kind of like a different feel to it. There's like more of a, I would say like we have a bit more of like a hardcore edge in our sound because we come from this rough place, like even when we were doing like pop punk, I kind of noticed it. If like to say like from a musical standpoint, like for example, No Use for a Name, they kind of like stay on a chord for a long time, and the melody happens, and then they move. We go fast. The chords change faster. Even with the pop punk stuff, there's like so many chords, but it's still like under this uh, melodic tree that makes sense. So I think that's our thing. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely, because there's definitely some major kind of hardcore skate punk influences on there, and traditionally they're a little bit more of I'd say riffers. There's boom,
Yeah.
riff, 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 and for me, I think that's I really kind of I really dig the kind of more ramp up, quick progressions. Although at the same time, I'm not gonna lie, Symptoms is one of my favorite album by you guys, and I think it's because it's so personally revealing, but the lyrics absolutely get me, especially the title track of Symptoms. It's one of my favorite tracks, and I don't know if it's the melody on the chorus or what, but I find myself driving so many times listening to that song over the years, and it almost feels fresh and new again. I don't know. There's something very special about that album, and I can absolutely see why Mike wanted to grab that up in the first place. It was a different change of pace for you guys as a band, but at the same time, it was reminiscent of all the things that you've been doing and doing well, but like in a new perspective, and I really, really liked it. It always stood out to me as one of my favorite albums of you guys, and I personally think that it was a game changer for you all.
Yeah, wow, thank you. I'm sorry, like my mind is split at the moment between the cat cries and
and the positive accolades. So
exactly.
I totally understand.
With the song Symptoms, that song almost didn't go on the album because like half of the guys in the band were like half into it, and we kept putting it off, and not like we were already at the studio and we were missing one song like to complete the 12-song album. We had like 11, and we were kind of like playing with like a few other ones. And then when we let Bill Stevenson hear the demo for Symptoms, he's like, "Why'd you save the best song from me?" We're like, why are you keeping this from me? This is the best song on your record. Let's record it. And we're like, oh, all right, here we go. But yeah, I think many of the songs that like a song like Symptoms, I don't know how I wrote it. I was going through some stuff with this person I just started dating, and she became my girlfriend. But so I was going through some like personal things, and that song just came in like 5 minutes. It's like many songs just come so quickly that I can't make sense of it later. It's just like a stream of consciousness, and you're not thinking too much, and it's just like something like a chemical thing happens. So yeah, many of the songs on that album came like that. They came rather quickly with no extra thought. Even like there's like this part that kind of sounds like Muse, and I don't even listen to Muse on the song Manic Depression, like the breakdown. I told the guys, like when I let them hear it, all right, this bridge sounds like a Muse, so I'm preparing you. It's kind of like weird, and they loved it. They're like, oh, this is great, and I'm like, are you sure? So.
And sometimes you have to kind of just roll with like the natural progressions of things like that.
Yeah.
And when I absolutely understand what that stream of conscious idea is. Sometimes when you try to write lyrics, you generally can tell that you're trying, but when you're in the moment and this is absolutely what you're feeling, it resonates. Yeah. And I think that's why I personally enjoy this album as much as I do, because I am a similar guy. I'm a bit of a hopeless romantic. I tend to wear my heart on my sleeve, and something about that and the storytelling behind this album that it hits all the right notes for me. You know.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you, because it's been a pivotal part of, you know, the last, you know, near decade of my life, where it's on a, you know, a constant rotation. And then to see you guys come to this point now of, you know, having, you know, best of, you know, most useless songs coming out and things like that. You know, it's kind of crazy just to naturally see, you know, the evolution of you guys. And I totally, you know, right there, you know, being a young kid, looking up, you know, NoFX and Bad Religion, to getting the opportunity 2 decades later to be able to not only, you know, see them live, but for me as a camera operator to be able to film my favorite bands, you know, to be able to sit there and have, you know, friggin' Melvin jump over my head during Dinosaurs Will Die, tears just coming down my face. I never thought that moment would ever happen to me. And it just goes to show, don't ever, anyone watching this, you can take anything from our show, anything we've talked to, is don't ever stop dreaming. Don't ever let this world stifle that beautiful childlike wonder that everybody has inside them. You know, if you can take anything here, it's just don't ever stop believing in what you're capable of, because you never know where the road is going to take you. And that's the most important thing in this life, where anything that you're endeavoring, in whatever art form you might be, whether it be, you know, cooking and culinary to poetry to punk rock to whatever it might be, don't ever stop believing in yourself and the possibility of what if. Because I think when you do, you're just closing yourself off to the realm of possibilities in the future.
Yep. I couldn't have said it. You couldn't have said it better.
And it's hard, you know, because there are so many things out there on the road, and, you know, I've lost a lot of people along the way. You know, unfortunately, the road isn't an easy place. This world is not an easy place. But knowing that, 1, you're not alone. You know, 2, that there's always help out there, and 3, never stop dreaming. Never stop wondering what if in the universe. You know, I think personally for me, I'm kind of, if I slow down, I'm afraid I'm gonna sink. You know, so I just constantly moving. I'm constantly moving. I got to keep moving forward and just trying. And that's the most important thing, because you never know when, nevertheless, you're going to get signed to your dream label, or even years later, get to do an album together, which is unbelievable. Now, unfortunately, it kind of dropped on Passover last year in the middle of a fucking pandemic, but you had gotten a chance to not only, you know, be on Mike's label, but to put out an album with him. What was that like, forming Bad Religion?
Oh, that. Well, the story behind that is we did that album, Tommy and June. If you heard about that, that was a project that Mike put together between me and Johnny from Old Man Markley. And we tried to spread the word out there, like, you know, to the Jewish community. And then we did a song about my grandfather that, once again, Fat Mike told me to write about it when I told him that my grandfather was in the Holocaust, and I told him the story. So he said, you got to write that song. And I never thought that I would write that song, or I never thought of it as in terms of songs. But, you know, that's Fat Mike's greatness. He just kind of like picks these little bits of what you're saying or what you're doing and tells you to kind of like, he helps you sharpen it. So we did that song, and I sent it to rabbis all over the greater Los Angeles area, and a few of them got back to me and wanted to meet. So I went to a few meetings, and one of them told me, do you play prayers? And I'm like, no, I don't, but if you want, I could probably take a Jewish prayer and make it into punk rock. So he's like, great, I want to hear a few of those. And I came to Fat Mike with that idea. He's like, we're not making a few of those, we're making a record. So I'm like, oh, here we go. So while we were thinking of what to call it, there's this photographer, Chris Grau. He always hangs out at Mike's place, and he's like doing all these like little jobs for him. He was working with the Bomb Pops, so he said Bad Religion, and we all had such a laugh out of that. And we thought, yeah, that's the obvious one, because the Jewish prayers played in punk rock sound like Bad Religion songs. Like the chord changes, and you know, some of the Bad Religion guys, they're Jewish, like Mr. Brad. So I'm sure he has some sort of like, whether it's from his like childhood background or his bar mitzvah. I don't know what, but I'm sure he takes from that. Yeah.
That's unlike anything I'd ever heard. I've never heard a punk rock album in Hebrew, so that right there, and I have, being from the Boston area, many friends that are still practicing or had raised in that community, especially from where I went to school in Brookline, Massachusetts. And it kind of blew me away when I saw that get released last year, and it didn't, to me, I was hitting up other friends in the punk rock community, that were raised or still practicing. I'm like, have you heard this yet? And like, no. And I'm like, how have you not heard this? I'm like, this is one of the coolest, most unique things I've seen happen in a long fucking time. I was really excited about the release of it. And for me, unfortunately, I don't speak Hebrew. I don't read Hebrew. So for me, I kind of was like this voyeur, kind of peeking in on something that I'm not entirely privy to, but absolutely enjoyed every single second of it. So first of all, I wanted to say that I truly enjoyed the album. And you're right, it does feel like Bad Religion, first and foremost. And at first, it took a little bit of research on my end. I'm like, wait a minute. Oh, this is what this is about. I was like, is this a Bad Religion album? Is this? And then when I finally figured out, some of the details about it, I was like, this is really fucking cool. This is really cool. So, do you think that you'll ever play out that album?
I don't know. For me, I'll tell you what.
Some lucky bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah, some lucky kid would be very fortunate to have that played.
I actually went to a Jewish school, to yeshiva, for 8 years in the U.S. when I was growing up. So that's where my background was from for those songs. Like for me, I knew most of those songs already. So I knew like how to sing them and how to, like, it's like, one time I didn't show up at the recording session and they were like, we can't do anything without you. We don't know what happens here, like what chord. So I'm like, yeah. So yeah, that project was pretty much like, it was sitting on my shoulders as far as like bringing out the arrangement, and then we kind of like built it all together with the other guys.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Now, before we start saying our goodbyes, obviously this last year has been crazy for everybody on so many different accounts. Have you been working on anything else since that release?
Yeah, I actually recorded a new solo album like a month and a half ago in Phoenix, Arizona. Yeah, so that's mastered. Now I'm just waiting to see when it's going to be released. I have a book in the works. When COVID started, I did a lot of these Facebook and Instagram lives for the first few months because I was separated from my fiance, who later became she was my girlfriend, but we got separated at the airport, and I was just like heartbroken because that wasn't meant to be. Like we didn't like break up or something. We just like the skies broke us up. So I was just depressed. So I just started doing these Facebook lives, and then when we finally met up, I was like, after 4 months, I was like, okay, it's time to get back to work, and we started working on those new songs for the most useless songs. And when we started rehearsing, that just I was like, why wait? Like, I mean, what is it, like 5 years already? Let's just start writing the next album. So I'd say that I have like 10, that we have like 9, 10 great new songs already in the Useless ID. So I've been nonstop for it, man. So I think hopefully by the end of the year we'll record the next album. So yeah, it's going to be powerful. A bunch of like new things in our sound.
Well, I'm personally really excited, and I would only hope that there would be a US 2022 tour to follow.
I hope so.
We can only hope, but I could assume, and I imagine that's going to be out on Fat Wreck as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd imagine Mike is going to want to do some things next year. Things, they're slowly starting to open up. I'm hoping to catch the boys at Riot Fest in Chicago. Make a trip down there. It's been a little bit since I've seen a live show. Nevertheless, brought the camera out to one. So I'm definitely looking forward to getting to a semblance of normalcy again. And making these plans. For future endeavors, be able to check people out live, and that's one thing. And all the bands I've managed to see and film over the years, I've not had a chance to be able to see Useless ID live. So I really hope you come back to the States.
Yeah,
I absolutely will be traveling out for that. So
we'll do our best.
From everything I've seen on live footage, it would be an absolute dream, one, to attend, nevertheless film. So you definitely got to stay in contact with me, because I would love to come out and bring my camera.
You got my email.
I absolutely got your email. We're definitely going to stay in contact. When can we expect the book to be released?
Ooh, I just had a talk with the publisher yesterday, and he told me, it takes like 13 months from the moment you give us the book for the book to come out. Yeah, so I think I don't know, it's going to take a while, like maybe fall 2022. Yeah.
So definitely, it seems like it's going to be a pretty busy year once the new Useless album comes out, your solo album, or next solo album rather. You got the book coming out, potential tour. So it really is looking like 2022 is going to be a hell of a year for you.
I sure hope so. I'm trying to plan it in a way that nothing kind of steps on the other thing, because once the Useless comes out, so that's full on Useless mode. I can't hey guys, I'm putting out a solo album right now. No, so
exactly. Everyone's gonna need its proper focus, in order to get the embers burning again for all these projects. And I'm sure for anybody, let it be established or new, stepping back out into this post-COVID music scene is going to be certainly interesting, as regulations still exist, and that's one thing that for me, punk and metal and hardcore, it's such an intimate experience. I don't think I'd personally be able to go to just a seated show. Like a lot of venues are doing, they have small tables of groups of 6, have everybody separated, and I understand that's exactly what you need to do to be safe, but personally, it's going to be really hard for me to be able to sit still at a punk show, especially nevertheless at a table. So, but here's hoping. Things are progressing safely. People are getting vaccinated. People are being smart. They're being concerned about their neighbor to the left and right of them, and hopefully, when things open back up, they can stay back open, and we don't backtrack at all.
Hell yeah, I sure hope so.
And that's just got to have, just hoping the best in humanity around us, and as hard as that is some days, I think it's needed now more than ever, and a little bit of hope goes a long way.
Sure.
So this has been unbelievable. I'm honored that you could come and join us for our season finale, our big 1-year anniversary party here on the show.
Thank you, man, and happy 1-year anniversary. It's been a great talk as well. I had a fun time talking to you. Sorry, I'm half quiet and half listening to cat cries, but
that's okay. It's the evening there in Italy. It's midday here. I'm about to go over and see my father and spend some time with him for
Do it. Happy Father's Day. Yes.
This is we obviously we tend not to record on broadcast days, but if you're watching this and you're a papa yourself, happy Father's Day to all the kick-ass punk rock dads out there. So this has been great. Hell of a way to wrap up the season. My guest this evening has been Yotam of Useless ID and To Bad Religion. Thank you so much for hanging out tonight.
For sure, my pleasure, and thank you for having me, man.
Cheers until the next time.